The first human interstellar vessel was not a warship. It was not the spearhead of a mighty fleet, nor was it the herald of an empire expanding into the cosmos. It was a single, rugged vessel, a patchwork of bleeding-edge technology and old-world engineering, built not for conquest, but for discovery. The Endeavour was humanity's first true step beyond the confines of its home system, a vessel constructed by the combined efforts of Earth's greatest minds, funded by a fragile alliance of nations, corporations, and private visionaries. It was not sleek, nor was it beautiful. Its hull bore the imperfections of a race still learning, its systems constantly patched and recalibrated to survive the endless void. But it was built with one unshakable purpose: to see what lay beyond the stars. As the Endeavour left Sol's influence, the silence of interstellar space enveloped it. There was no interference, no signals from Earth, no comforting presence of satellites or stations, just the vast, endless black stretching in all directions. The crew of the ship, scientists, explorers, engineers, felt it keenly. For all of their simulations and training, nothing could prepare them for the sheer isolation of deep space. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. For months, they traveled beyond the boundaries of human existence. They cataloged distant stars, analyzed drifting debris from ancient collisions, and sent back transmissions detailing every newfound celestial wonder. Each day carried them farther from everything familiar. But in the end, it was not the wonders of the cosmos that would change humanity's fate. It was the signal. It was faint at first, a rhythmic pulse, a whisper against the ever-present void, almost lost in the cosmic background noise. The ship's AI flagged it as artificial. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message. And it had been repeating itself, uninterrupted, for untold millennia. The crew's excitement was instant. It could be a remnant of some lost civilization, a sign that humanity was not the first to reach beyond their world. Or perhaps, impossibly, it could be something still alive, still waiting. The decision was made quickly. They would follow the signal. The journey stretched across years. The Endeavour's engines, built with the best human ingenuity had to offer, burned with relentless determination, pushing them further into uncharted space. The signal grew stronger. The coordinates became clear. What had once been a whisper became a beacon, guiding them toward a single location, a point in the void, orbiting a star long since dead. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. Station. It was enormous, ancient, and undeniably artificial. Its silhouette was unlike anything in human design. An intricate lattice of metal and energy, constructed on a scale so massive that it dwarfed even the largest of Earth's megastructures. It drifted in the darkness, locked in orbit around the cold remains of a star that had burned out eons ago. For a long time, there was only silence. Sensors scanned the structure, searching for signs of life. The crew debated. Was it a ruin, an abandoned relic of a species long since vanished? Had the builders of this place been lost to time? Then the lights came on. The station awoke with a hum, power surging through its conduits. The Endeavour's instruments were overwhelmed with data, energy readings off the charts, artificial gravity stabilizing within the station, systems reactivating as if in response to their arrival, and then the transmission came. Identify yourselves. The voice was not human. It was deep, layered with harmonics that resonated in ways no organic throat could produce. It spoke in a language unknown to Earth, yet the meaning was clear. Humanity had been noticed. Protocols were scrambled into place. The Endeavour's captain, Elias Vance, responded carefully, identifying their ship, their homeworld, their peaceful intentions. His words carried weight, the first human voice ever to reach an intelligent species beyond Earth. But the response was not what they had hoped. The station was not abandoned. It was not a ruin. It was a gateway. Beyond it lay the Galactic Council, an alliance of species that had long since conquered the stars. The crew was granted permission to dock. The humans stepped onto alien metal for the first time, their every movement watched by figures from countless worlds, some towering and armored, others draped in flowing robes, their features obscured by veils of light. The Council had been watching humanity for centuries. There was no celebration, no grand welcome. The representatives of the council stood before them, ancient and unyielding, their expressions unreadable. Humanity, they decided, was not special. "You are young," one of them said, its voice a blend of tones that vibrated in the bones. "You are ambitious. We have seen your kind before." The crew argued their case. They spoke of humanity's resilience, its endless drive to overcome obstacles, the ingenuity that had brought them here against all odds. They spoke of Earth's history, of wars fought and won, of struggles that had forged them into something stronger. The council was unmoved. "You are not the first to reach the stars," they said, "nor will you be the last." A decision was made. Humanity would be allowed to exist within the galactic order, but only under strict regulations. They would be permitted trade and communication. They would be allowed to expand, but only within the boundaries the council imposed. No military expansion, no unrestricted technological development, no claims to uncharted worlds. It was, they were told, for their own good. Humanity had no choice but to accept. Earth's leaders met the ruling. With outward compliance, signing agreements, sending emissaries to integrate into the galactic community, they adapted. They played the role of the young race eager to learn. But beneath the surface, plans were already being laid. In the shadows of the galaxy, beyond the eyes of the council, humanity worked. They expanded in secret, settling on uncharted worlds, beyond known hyperlanes. They built shipyards within the labyrinthine asteroid fields where no sensors could detect them. They studied the technology of the elder species, not to use it blindly, but to understand it, to surpass it. The council saw only what humanity wanted them to see, and by the time they realized the truth, it would be too late. Humanity was patient. They had no other choice. The Galactic Council's decree was final. Their laws were absolute, enforced by fleets that dwarfed anything Earth could muster. Humanity had only just taken its first steps beyond the stars, against the weight of an empire that had stood for millennia. They were nothing more than an upstart species. And yet, they did not break. In the grand chambers of the council, human diplomats smiled, nodded, and agreed to every demand. They presented themselves as a race eager to learn, eager to grow under the watchful guidance of their elder peers. They accepted trade restrictions, handed over ship designs for evaluation, and submitted to the regulations that kept them in check. But Earth was not idle. In the dark corners of the galaxy, beyond the hyperlanes mapped by the Council, beyond the watchful gaze of their monitoring stations, humanity expanded in silence. The first colony was established in the shadow of a dying star, in a system dismissed by the Council's surveyors as barren and lifeless. The world was harsh, winds that howled across frozen plains, an atmosphere barely capable of sustaining breath. But humans did not need paradise. They needed secrecy. The settlement began as a single outpost, carved into the ice, shielded from prying eyes. It was manned by pioneers, scientists, engineers, and soldiers who had abandoned their lives on Earth to build something greater. They worked without recognition, without reward, knowing that their names would not be remembered in any history book. More colonies followed. Some were built into the bones of ancient asteroids, others hidden beneath the swirling storms of gas. Giants, their structures masked by interference fields. Mining operations stripped raw materials from dead moons, refining metals in orbital forges that emitted no detectable signals. Humanity's fleets grew, not in open shipyards, but in forgotten places. Deep space refueling stations were established beyond the boundaries of known space, where automated drones assembled warships piece by piece. Research stations developed new technology, their scientists pushing the limits of physics, searching for an edge that would give them the advantage they so desperately needed. It was a slow war. A war of information. For every sensor probe the Council deployed, humanity learned how to evade detection. For every restriction placed on their technology, they developed countermeasures in secret. They studied the tactics of the elder races, not to imitate them, but to outthink them, and the Council never suspected. They had seen it all before. Countless species had reached the stars, only to be shackled by the weight of the Council's laws. Some rebelled, striking out in defiance, and were crushed before they could become a threat. Others accepted their place, resigning themselves to a life of mediocrity. The Council believed humanity was no different. They were wrong. For years, Earth's leaders played the part of the obedient child. Their diplomats spoke of unity, of cooperation, of trust. They signed every treaty, agreed to every regulation, and while they smiled in the daylight, in the shadows, they built an empire. Then came the incident. It began on the edge of known space, in a lawless sector where the Council's influence was weak. A human trade convoy, operating legally under the Council's restrictions, was ambushed by a group of raiders. These were not mere pirates. They were enforcers, mercenaries employed by the Council's more powerful factions to keep younger species in line. The attack was swift. The raiders struck without warning, boarding the human vessels, slaughtering their crews. No warning was given. No demands were made. It was a message, a reminder that humanity was not in control. But the raiders made a mistake. One ship survived. The Dauntless was a simple freighter, unarmed, built to haul cargo between stations. Its crew was untrained for combat, its systems never designed for war. But humanity had learned long ago that survival was not about strength. It was about adaptation. The captain of the Dauntless, a woman named Cara Solis, refused to die. She overrode the ship's engines, overloading them in a desperate burst of speed that sent the vessel spiraling into the void. For 6 months, the Dauntless drifted through dead space, its crew surviving on rationed supplies, repairing their damaged systems with whatever scraps they could salvage. By the time they returned to human space, they had proof. Sensor logs, communications, intercepts, evidence that the attack had been sanctioned by factions within the Council itself. The truth was undeniable. The Council did not see humanity as a partner. They saw them as prey. Earth's response was immediate. The Council expected outrage. They expected protests, petitions, demands for justice. They had seen it all before. What they did not expect was silence. There were no public statements, no cries for war, no demands for reparations. Earth simply acknowledged the attack and moved on. The Council's factions took this as a sign of weakness. They believed that humanity had been put in its place, that they had learned their lesson. They were wrong. In the darkness of uncharted space, human warships began to move. Not in force, not in open defiance, but in precision. Shadow fleets, designed not for direct confrontation, but for strategic strikes. The first disappearance was dismissed as an accident. A Council patrol, assigned to monitor human trade routes, failed to report in. Their distress beacon was activated, for only a fraction of a second before vanishing. The second disappearance raised suspicions. A supply station, located near one of humanity's hidden colonies, went dark overnight. The Council sent investigators, but found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, only silence. Then the third incident happened. This time, it was different. Council warship, one of their enforcers, heavily armed and battle-hardened, was found adrift in space. Its hull was intact, its weapons untouched, but its crew was gone. Every corridor was empty, every console still active. The ship's logs showed no signs of a struggle, no evidence of forced entry. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. The message was clear. Humanity was not afraid. They had learned how to fight without fighting. By the time the Council realized what was happening, it was already too late. Humanity had become a ghost in the void, an enemy that could not be seen, could not be predicted. They struck where they chose, when they chose, vanishing before retribution could follow. And for the first time in centuries, the Council began to fear. The silence was unbearable. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled with absolute certainty. They had guided the younger species with careful hands, offering them technology, trade, and a place in the grand order of civilization. But always on the Council's terms. Always under their control. Empires had risen and fallen under their watchful gaze, each one believing itself unique, each one learning the same lesson. The Council was the master of the stars, and all others must obey. And yet something was wrong. Their fleets patrolled the hyperlanes as they always had. Their Stations monitored the movement of every recognized species. Their spies listened, recorded, and analyzed every word spoken in the great halls of diplomacy. But humanity had gone silent. The species that had once been eager to please, eager to negotiate, eager to integrate, had vanished from the Council's notice. Their trade convoys still operated, but now they traveled through routes the Council could not track. Their ambassadors still spoke, but now they revealed nothing of importance. Their colonies still existed, but now their expansion no longer followed the predictable patterns the Council had come to expect, and the disappearances continued. Patrol ships, gone. Monitoring stations, offline. Entire supply chains disrupted. At first, the Council refused to believe it was an attack. They told themselves that it was mere coincidence, that unexplained malfunctions and lost vessels were statistical inevitabilities in the vastness of space. Then, they received the message. It came from Raylos Prime, one of the Council's primary outposts near human space. The transmission lasted only 20 seconds before cutting to static. A single voice, no threats, no demands. You made a mistake. And then, silence. The Council convened an emergency session. The Chamber of Order, the vast circular hall where the most powerful beings in the galaxy debated the fate of nations, was filled with an energy it had not known in centuries. Representatives of the elder species argued amongst themselves. Some demanded retaliation, a demonstration of strength to remind humanity of its place. Others urged caution, warning that a poorly planned response might drive the humans into open defiance. The Supreme Arbiter, an ancient being who had ruled for over 1,000 years, listened in silence. Then he made his decision. A fleet would be sent. Not an invasion force, not yet, but a show of power, a reminder. The humans would see the full strength of the Council. They would be brought back into line. The 7th Expeditionary Armada was assembled. 50 warships, led by the battlecruiser, Indomitable, a vessel that had crushed entire rebellions in the past. The fleet departed with confidence. They would travel to Sol, the heart of humanity's domain. They would present their demands, and if humanity refused, then the Council would make an example of them. But the fleet never arrived. The ambush on the edge of Council space near a barren, unnamed system, the 7th Armada dropped out of hyperspace and immediately knew something was wrong. There was no warning, no buildup, no declaration of war. The first ship to die was the Vigilant, a destroyer on the outer edge of the formation. One moment, it was running standard scans. The next, its reactor detonated in a flash of white-hot fire. Seconds later, the halberd followed, its engines sliced apart by an unseen force. The fleet scrambled into formation, weapons primed. But there was nothing to shoot at. The attackers were ghosts, no energy signatures, no visible hulls, only the cold whisper of death in the void. The Indomitable's captain barked orders. Scan the system. Find the enemy. Then, the enemy revealed itself, human warships. But they were not the crude, outdated vessels the Council believed humanity possessed. These were something else entirely. Their hulls were black, absorbing the light around them. Their engines left no trace. Their weapons, not energy cannons, not projectile launchers, but something new, tore through Council defenses like paper. These were not ships built for open battle. They were built for a different kind of war. One by one, the Council's warships vanished. Some exploded under precise coordinated strikes. Others were disabled, left drifting in the void, their crews helpless as the shadows closed in. Within minutes, half the fleet was gone. The Indomitable prepared to send a distress signal, an urgent plea for reinforcements. But then they heard the voice. It was not a broadcast. It was not coming from the human ships. It was coming from inside their own systems. A single sentence. Cold. Final. You should have left us alone. And then, the flagship's engines failed. Its weapons went offline. Its shields collapsed, not destroyed, not killed, disabled. And then, the humans did something unthinkable. They let the survivors go. The remaining Council warships, crippled and humiliated, were allowed to retreat. Not because the humans were merciful, but because they wanted the Council. to understand. The message was clear. The survivors limped back to the Council homeworld, battle-scarred, broken, humiliated. Their reports were impossible. Humanity had not just won. They had never been in danger. They had let the Council come. They had let them think they were in control. And then, when the moment was right, they had demonstrated just how wrong the Council had been. It was not a war, it was a lesson. And for the first time in the Council's long history, they were afraid. The survivors of the 7th Expeditionary Armada returned in disgrace. 50 warships had left. Fewer than 10 crawled back, broken, their hulls scarred, their crews shaken beyond repair. What had once been the pride of the Galactic Council now drifted into orbit around the capital world, a mockery of their former strength. As soon as they arrived, every comm channel across the Council's network exploded with demands for an explanation. How had a lesser species, a species they had considered manageable, utterly dismantled one of their strongest fleets? The Supreme Arbiter, watching from the grand observation deck of the Chamber of Order, remained silent. He had seen many wars. He had witnessed countless empires rise and fall. But this was different. Reports from the few surviving captains revealed the terrifying truth. Humanity had evolved beyond their expectations. They had been watching, studying, preparing. Their ships were not crude, outdated relics, but cutting-edge weapons of war designed for a new kind of battlefield, one where the Council's tactics and technology meant nothing. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was no longer in control. Panic in the Chamber of Order. The moment the fleet's report reached the Council, chaos erupted. The Chamber of Order, a hall built to house the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, had never seen such disarray. Delegates shouted over one another. Some, still clinging to the illusion of control, demanded retaliation. Humanity must be crushed, they cried. This defiance must not stand. Others, more cautious, more afraid, argued for restraint. They could have wiped out our fleet, the representative of the Kryn Dominion said, his reptilian eyes flickering with unease. Yet they let the survivors go. That was a message, not an act of war. The debate raged, growing more desperate by the minute. Humans are still a minor power, one counselor insisted, his voice trembling slightly. If we strike with overwhelming force, are you blind? Another interrupted. They let us think we were powerful. We are not dealing with an upstart species. We are dealing with a civilization that has spent decades, maybe longer, preparing for this moment. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the Supreme Arbiter. The ancient leader sat motionless, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but there was a shadow behind it, a hesitation that had never been there before. We need to know more. The infiltration attempt decision was made. Direct military action was too risky. If the humans had grown this powerful in secret, there was no telling what else they had hidden. The Council needed intelligence. They needed to know what humanity had become. A covert operation was assembled. Teams of spies, infiltration specialists, and the most advanced cyber warfare units in the galaxy. Their mission: infiltrate human space and uncover the truth. They were chosen from species known for their adaptability. The Kelmari, with their chameleon-like skin. The Arothi, whose biology allowed them to mimic human physiology almost perfectly. The Veltar, masters of digital warfare, capable of slicing through the most secure networks in the known galaxy. They slipped into human space like whispers in the dark, disguised as traitors, diplomats, even refugees. But humanity was waiting. The first teams disappeared within days. No distress calls, no escape. They simply vanished. The Council sent more. Some made it farther, reaching human colonies, blending into the background of bustling spaceports and trade hubs. They found nothing unusual. Humans lived their lives as if nothing had changed. They still laughed, still fought, still thrived. There were no signs of totalitarian rule, no evidence of mass militarization. And yet, something was wrong. The spies reported an unshakable feeling, as if they were being watched, as if every step, every word, every move was known before they even made it. Then, the second wave of infiltrators started vanishing too. one by one. No warnings, no traces. The ones who survived long enough to send messages all said the same thing. They see us. And then, nothing. The final attempt was made by a Veltari cyber operative. Instead of going in physically, he launched a deep infiltration of human data networks. The moment he made contact, human systems turned against him. The firewalls didn't just block him, they hunted him down. His own species had pioneered cyber warfare, but what he encountered was something beyond anything the Council had ever developed. The human AIs didn't just defend their networks. They learned, adapted. And then, before he could escape, a simple message appeared on his screen. "We were expecting you." That was the last thing he saw. The warning days later, the Supreme Arbiter sat alone in his chamber when his personal terminal activated on its own. No alarms, no alerts. The security protocols, unbreakable by any known force, had already been bypassed. A message appeared. "No sender, no trace. There will be no war. You know what will happen if you push us. Do not make that mistake." And then, before his horrified eyes, every encrypted file in the Council's archives containing intelligence on humanity was deleted. Gone. It was not a declaration of war. It was a warning. A warning from a species that had long since outgrown the Council's control. For the first time in recorded history, the Supreme Arbiter, the most powerful being in the galaxy, felt fear. The Supreme Arbiter did not speak of the message. He did not summon his advisors, nor did he inform the Chamber of Order. He simply sat in his darkened sanctum, staring at the empty space where the message had once flickered. His mind weighed, down by a realization too vast to fully comprehend. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled through dominance, through control. Wars had been fought, species had been subjugated, empires had been shattered, all under the iron hand of the Council's design. It had always been a simple equation. Strength equaled authority, and authority equaled survival. But what if that equation no longer applied? What if humanity had moved beyond it? What if the Council had not been the masters of the galaxy at all, but simply the last ones to realize that control was an illusion? The silent concession over the next cycles, a subtle shift began to take place. Without any formal discussion, without a single public statement, the Council quietly halted all operations against humanity. Diplomatic envoys, which had once been a mere formality, were suddenly given priority. Trade restrictions were lifted. Border patrols were reduced. The Council stopped speaking of Earth as a minor power and instead began referring to it as an independent sovereign force, a term reserved only for civilizations that the Council could not afford to challenge. The Supreme Arbiter watched as these changes unfolded, but he made no move to stop them. He had already made his decision. There would be no war, because there had never been a war to begin with. There had only ever been humanity's patience, and the Council had come dangerously close to testing its limits. The Ghost Fleet, but not all within the Council agreed with this silent surrender. There were those, military commanders, ambitious warlords, old empires that had once ruled unchallenged, who refused to accept the idea that a species born from a backwater world could wield such quiet dominance. In the shadowed corridors of the Dominion Corps, in the private halls of the Grand Imperium, in the war rooms of the Vren Directorate, whispers turned into plans. The Council's official stance was peace. Their stance would be war. A secret coalition was formed, one that rejected the Supreme Arbiter's silent retreat. The most powerful factions of the old military order pooled their resources, building something that had not been seen in the galaxy for centuries. A fleet created not to protect the Council's interests, but to reclaim them. A fleet with no insignia, no official record. A fleet that would strike from the dark, leaving no trace of its origins. A ghost fleet. The attack it took 2 cycles for the Ghost Fleet to gather its strength. Hidden shipyards across the Outer Rim churned out warships in secret, each more advanced than the last. Mercenaries, outcasts, and warriors from 100 species were recruited, bound by a single purpose: to remind humanity of its place. The plan was simple. Strike a human border world, a colony isolated enough that no reinforcements could arrive in time. Eliminate all resistance, seize control, force humanity to react, and when the humans responded, the fleet would be waiting. They would learn at last that they were not untouchable, that the Council still held dominion over the stars, that they were not the masters of the galaxy. The fall of Helios Prime. The colony of Helios Prime was chosen as the target, a world on the edge of human-controlled space, rich in resources, boasting a small but strategic military presence. It was perfect. The attack came without warning. Hundreds of warships burst into real space, their weapons lighting the void before the colony had time to react. Orbital defenses were obliterated within minutes. Cities burned as shock troops descended, slaughtering anything that resisted. A single distress call was sent before the comms were cut. A simple message, repeating over and over. "We are under attack. Unknown forces. Helios Prime is falling." And then, silence. The Ghost Fleet had achieved total victory. They did not know that they had already lost. The answer. For 12 standard hours, the Ghost Fleet celebrated their success. They planted their flags on human soil. They paraded through the ruins of the colony, broadcasting their triumph. They sent a message to the Council, declaring that they had restored balance, that humanity had been put in its place. They waited for the retaliation they had prepared for. But no warships arrived. No fleet came screaming through hyperspace. Instead, something else happened. Every system and every warship of the Ghost Fleet shut down simultaneously. Engines, life support, weapons, everything ceased to function. Pilots and officers clawed at controls that no longer responded. Power flickered and died. Emergency lights failed. Even the artificial gravity aboard the ships collapsed, sending soldiers drifting helplessly through their own vessels. Panic set in. The fleet's admirals screamed for answers, for explanations. They received one. The Ghost Fleet's communications array, now locked and inoperable, displayed a single message. It contained no threats, no demands, only words. "Leave. Now. This is your only warning." And then, every ship's reactor began to overload. The admirals didn't hesitate. They ran. Helios Prime was abandoned within the hour. The Ghost Fleet, what remained of it, scattered, fleeing back into the void. Some ships exploded before they could escape, their reactors pushed beyond critical limits. Others barely limped into hyperspace, their crews too terrified to ever speak of what had happened. And those who did survive would never make the mistake of challenging humanity again. The Supreme Arbiter sat in silence, watching as reports poured in from every intelligence branch under the Council's command. The Ghost Fleet had been obliterated, not by war, not by diplomacy, but by something else. Something unseen. Something that should not have been possible. No warships had arrived. No planetary defenses had been reactivated. And yet, an entire battle group, one of the most advanced in Council history, had been shut down and dismantled without a single human shot being fired. The silence of his advisors spoke louder than words. They had spent years studying humanity, analyzing its technology, its fleets, its strategies. They had believed they knew what the Terrans were capable of. They had been wrong. They did not know humanity at all. The unanswered question. There were only two explanations for what had happened. Either humanity had developed a weapon so advanced that it could disable an entire fleet from across the stars, or they had never needed one in the first place. The Arbiter closed his eyes, replaying the message that had been found aboard the ruined ships. "Leave. Now. This is your only warning." There was no trace of hostility. No arrogance. Just a statement of fact, and the message that had not been spoken was even clearer. This was mercy. Do not make us reconsider. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, a civilization had achieved absolute deterrence, not through brute force, not through overwhelming numbers, but through something far more terrifying. Through the unknown. The paranoia that followed. The Ghost Fleet had vanished, but its shadow remained. The Council's admirals began to question everything. They pored over sensor data, trying to find any indication of how humanity had achieved such an impossible victory. But there was nothing. No energy signatures, no transmission intercepts, no evidence of anything at all. as if humanity had simply decided that the fleet should no longer function. The paranoia spread through the highest echelons of power. If humanity had technology beyond their comprehension, why had they never used it before? Why had they allowed the Council to believe they were still equals? What else were they hiding? The Arbiter saw the fear growing, saw the way his military commanders whispered behind closed doors, how even the most powerful figures in the galaxy had begun looking over their shoulders, and he understood. It was not the Ghost Fleet's defeat that terrified them. It was the realization that humanity had chosen to let them live. The ones who vanished, then something even stranger began to happen. Those who had planned the Ghost Fleet's attack, the admirals, the strategists, the warlords, began to disappear. Not all at once, not in ways that could be easily explained. One was found drifting in a private transport, dead before his ship had even left orbit. Another was discovered aboard his flagship, his bodyguards swearing they had never left his side. And yet, somehow, he was gone. Some simply vanished without a trace. No distress signals, no records, nothing. The Council tried to investigate. There was never any evidence, never a single trace of who or what was responsible. The remaining warlords fell into silence. The admirals who had once whispered of taking control now refused to even speak humanity's name. Whatever was happening, they understood the message. Humanity had not retaliated. They had corrected the mistake. The gathering of the Silent Ones, the Arbiter summoned a private meeting with the most powerful rulers of the Galactic Council. The heads of empires, the leaders of civilizations, the warlords who had held the galaxy in their grip for thousands of cycles. No one spoke when they arrived. No pleasantries were exchanged. For the first time in history, there were no power struggles, no political maneuvering, because for the first time in history, they were all afraid of the same thing. And fear had a way of making even the most bitter enemies suddenly feel like allies. The Arbiter spoke only one sentence. "Do we still believe we are the masters of the galaxy?" The silence that followed was its own answer. The final decision the Council had spent centuries ruling through control, through force. But control only worked against those who needed to fight to survive, against those who could be intimidated, who could be manipulated. Humanity was not like the others. They had never fought for control, because they had never needed it. They had only ever allowed the galaxy to believe in its own supremacy, until now. The Supreme Arbiter turned toward his gathered rulers and spoke the words that would change history. "We will never speak of this again." And so, the Galactic Council, the most powerful force in the universe, did the only thing they could. They conceded. Not through treaties, not through diplomacy, but through silence. And in that silence, an unspoken law was born. Humanity was not to be challenged. Humanity was not to be provoked. Humanity would never call themselves the masters of the galaxy, because they did not need to. The galaxy did not change overnight. There were no grand announcements, no declarations of surrender. No official documents were signed. And yet, in the halls of power, in the war rooms of once mighty empires, in the whispered conversations of rulers who had thought themselves gods, everything had changed. The Galactic Council still existed, in name at least. The Supreme Arbiter still sat on his throne, issuing decrees, settling disputes between lesser species, maintaining the illusion that the galaxy still operated as it always had. But behind the scenes, behind the illusion of governance, every decision was made with one unspoken question in mind. What will the humans think? It was never said aloud, never written in official records, but it was there, woven into the very fabric of the Council's existence. They did not send fleets into Terran space. They did not interfere with human colonies. They did not even ask what had happened to the Ghost Fleet, nor did they dare seek revenge for the vanished warlords. Humanity had spoken once, and that had been enough. The quiet withdrawals. The shift was subtle at first. Borders that had once been heavily contested were abandoned without a word. Empires that had spent centuries expanding into new sectors suddenly found reasons to halt their advance, not because of war, not because of diplomacy, but simply because they had realized that there were places they did not belong. Trade routes adjusted. Migration patterns changed. The great fleets of conquest that had once defined the galaxy's balance of power were recalled to their homeworlds, left to gather dust in orbital docks, their admirals reluctant to give orders that might draw the wrong kind of attention. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was at peace, not because of treaties, not because of compromise, because, for the first time, no one wanted to take the risk. The ones who remembered most civilizations did not understand what had happened. To them, the Galactic Council was still the supreme authority, still the governing force of known space. They went about their lives as they always had, unaware that their rulers now lived under a shadow they dared not name. But there were some who knew the truth. The old warlords who had barely escaped the purge, the admirals who had once believed they could crush the Terrans, the intelligence officers who had spent years studying humanity, only to realize they had never truly understood them at all. They sat in silence, watching as the galaxy forgot, and they knew. The greatest power in the universe was not the Council, not the warfleets. It was the power of fear, and humanity had mastered it. The last attempt. There was one final act of defiance. One last attempt to challenge the unspoken rule that had been carved into the stars. A minor warlord, young and ambitious, unaware of the full truth, decided that he would succeed where his predecessors had failed. He assembled a new fleet, one even larger than the Ghost Fleet. More ships, more weapons, more advanced technology. He convinced himself that the Council had grown weak, that humanity's silence was not power, but cowardice. And so, he launched his attack. His ships entered human space, and nothing happened. No defenses activated, no war fleets appeared, no threats were issued. The warlord's fleet advanced, scanning the Terran systems, searching for a response. There was none. He should have turned back, but arrogance is a blinding thing. He ordered his ships deeper into human space, reaching the very core. Of the Terran worlds, still nothing. No broadcasts, no movement, no resistance, just silence.